Scripture reading this evening will be from Genesis chapter 18. Genesis 18 and verse 19. For I know him, that he will command his children and his household after him, and they shall keep the way of the Lord, to do justice and judgment, that the Lord may bring upon Abraham that which he has spoken of him.
Last Sunday, we looked at the topic, teaching our personal family with love. And I got a little ambitious and tried to teach 2 chapters of the book of Proverbs and barely got through chapter 1. And so this evening, Lord willing, we're going to try and get through the last chapter of the lesson, which is ironically the last chapter of the book of Proverbs. But before we get into points 2 and 3, a little recap. What we discussed last Sunday, teaching our personal family in love, we noticed how in Acts chapter 1 and verse 8 it says, "But you will receive power when the Holy Spirit has come upon you, and you shall be my witnesses both in Jerusalem and in all Judea and Samaria, and even in the remotest parts of the earth." And we noticed in that pattern that Jesus sets for the apostles, they were to start in their backyard, Jerusalem. Then they were to go into their county and city, Judea and Samaria. And then they were to go into the uttermost parts of the world, all of humanity. And if you look throughout the New Testament, especially in the book of Acts and in 1 Timothy chapter 3 and Titus chapter 1, you see that the focus, when especially wanting to be a leader, is you start in the home. And that's what we focused on last Sunday. And Lord willing, in the future, we'll notice the other steps in the community and then in the uttermost parts of the world, what our roles are in reaching the lost. But notice how he says, start in Jerusalem. Start with your family. Start in your backyard. And in the qualifications for elders, as was mentioned, 1 Timothy chapter 3 and Titus chapter 1, it says in 1 Timothy chapter 3, verses 4 and 5, if he does not know how to conduct his own household, that is, lead his own household well, why do we expect him to lead the family of God? So in order to be a leader in the church, a man must first keep his household in check. And of course, there's elders' wives. We usually look over elders' wives because there's not explicit qualifications that says, and elders' wives must be. But if you look in the context, we see that there are qualifications for the wives, talking about with the deacons. And of course, if you're going to have a leader in the church, their spouse needs to be in check as well. That is, following the law of God. Well, last Sunday, we noticed step 1, how do I teach my children in love? And we looked through Proverbs chapter 6, the practicality of wisdom. We see that we are to first teach them godly social skills. Second, we are to teach them who God is not, as well as who God is. We are to, number 3, teach them to respect authority. And then number 4, teach them godly marriages. And we notice within that chapter that Solomon, speaking to both his son Rehoboam and to those who he is going to counsel to eventually be leaders within Israel, he says you need to start in the home. If you want to be successful in leadership as a whole, it starts in the home. Well, we noticed how to teach our children, but there's more in a household than just children. What about the husbands to their wives and their wives to their husbands? Well, there's a chapter on that in the book of Proverbs, Proverbs chapter 31. In Proverbs chapter 31, a lot of us would probably know chapter 31 as the virtuous woman. But the virtuous woman doesn't start until verse 10. So there's verses 1 through 9 that a lot of people just skip over. And so what we're going to do is, in verses 1 through 9, we're going to notice, how do I lead my wife in love? And then in verses 10 through the end of the chapter, verse 31, we're going to notice, how do I strengthen my husband in love? So without further ado, let's start in verse 1. It says, starting in verse 1, the words of King Lemuel, the oracle which his mother taught him. What, O my son? And what, O son of my womb? And what, O son of my vows. Do not give your strength to women or your ways to that which destroys kings. It is not for kings, O Lemuel. It is not for the kings to drink wine or for rulers to desire strong drink. For they will drink and forget what is decreed and pervert the rights of all the afflicted. Give strong drink to him who is perishing and wine to him whose life is bitter. Let him drink and forget his poverty and remember his trouble no more. Open your mouth for the mute, for the rights of all the unfortunate. Open your mouth, judge righteously, and defend the rights of the afflicted and needy. So what is King Lemuel speaking of here? And actually, it's his mom instructing him, saying, now, Lemuel, you're going to be a king one of these days, or you are a king, and you need to make sure that you follow these instructions on your part. Well, what are the parts that he plays? Well, verses 1 through 3, a godly man avoids immorality with women. Verses 1 through 3, a godly man avoids immorality with women. Verses 4 through 7, a godly man avoids intoxication from wine. A godly man avoids intoxication from wine. And then the latter part, verses 8 through 9, a godly man avoids indifference toward the weak. A godly man avoids indifference toward the weak. So let's break this down and notice the first three verses here. The first three verses. A godly man avoids immorality with women. Now, when we break this down, we're going to be talking about this in context of a husband in his household with his wife and a father to his children. Okay? A godly man avoids immorality with women. What does the passage say? What, O my son? And what, O son of my womb? Look at verse 3. Do not give your strength to women or your ways to that which destroys kings. Now, not much is said here about the woman that his mother is saying, do not give your ways over to her, your vows over to her. What is she talking about? Well, if you read throughout the entire book of Proverbs, you see that King Solomon, who, by the way, had, 900 women in his household? 400 wives, 400 wives, 600 concubines, 1,000 in all? Imagine a man who has 1,000 women, 900 plus women in his household, telling us you need to only have one wife. That comes from wisdom and experience. Now, just from experience here with one wife, I love my wife. I gotta be careful how I say this. I love my wife. I couldn't imagine spending my life with any other woman, or in the context of Solomon, with more women. Now, imagine husbands. You know the struggle and the battles it is to try and understanding your wife. Try to understand 900 plus women in your lifetime. Never going to happen. Try and understand one woman for a lifetime. That's the way God intended it to be. One woman, one man for life. King Lemuel's mother says, you need to make sure that you're not just giving yourself to any woman out there. You need to preserve yourself for one woman, because that's how it needs to be. Imagine a father, a husband in a household who's constantly going around flirting with other women, giving himself to any woman that looks his way, while he has a wife at home who's taking care of the children. What kind of example is that going to be for the children? And what is that going to do to the wife at home? It is going to destroy that household. To sum it up, it'll destroy the marriage. It'll destroy relationships between the husband and wife, between the father and the children. It'll destroy relationships with that man and his parents, that man and his siblings. Any relationship that man has, any friendship, it's gone. And maybe in the process developing friendships that he ought not to have. Lemuel is told by his mother, do not throw yourself to any woman. Do not give your vow to just any woman. Give it to one woman. Do not give your strength to just any women. If you look in Proverbs chapter 5 is a really good chapter on this subject. Let's turn there together. Proverbs chapter 5, and starting in verse 15. I wish we had time to go through the entire chapter, but if I do that, we're not getting through this lesson. So you can read it on your own time. But we will notice a few verses here. In this context of Proverbs chapter 5, I have it titled, The Fountain of Wisdom. the fountain of wisdom. I'll actually read verse 1. It says, "My son, give attention to my wisdom, and incline your ear to my understanding, that you may observe the discretion, and your lips may reserve knowledge. For the lips of an adulteress drip honey, and smoother than oil is her speech. But in the end she is bitter as wormwood. Sharp as two-edged sword, her feet go down to death, her steps take hold of Sheol. She does not ponder the path of life, her ways are unstable, she does not know it." Now look at verse 15. "Drink water from your own cistern, and fresh water from your own well. Should your springs be dispersed abroad, streams of water in the streets? Let them be yours alone, and not for strangers with you." What Solomon is saying here is he starts out saying, do not go after the adulterous woman. Her ways look very appealing. Her lips are as smooth as honey. Her words are very enticing. But her lifestyle will lead you to a lifestyle of death. And then in verse 15 he says, "Now, what you need to do is drink from your own cistern." What does that mean, Solomon? He's using figure of speech. He's saying, if you have your own cistern, why are you trying to go after and drink somebody else's cistern? And while you're doing that, do you want somebody to drink from your own? What he's saying is, do you really, while you have your own spouse, go and take somebody else's spouse and let somebody else take your spouse? It's all mixed up. That's not how it's supposed to be. You need to drink from your own cistern. Enjoy the lifestyle with your own wife and keep it between you and your wife. Don't go sleeping around with other women who's either not married, that's not yours, or somebody else's wife. You stick within your lane and you love your wife and only your wife. King Lemuel was told this by his mother, who was going to be a king. And notice what she says, or ways to that which destroys kings. A king is supposed to be powerful. A king is supposed to be clear-headed. He's supposed to know how to help lead his family. How can he do that if he's sleeping around with women who, it says explicitly, this lifestyle destroys kings? What is it going to do to a husband and a father in his own household? He can't lead properly. He can't set the right example. Look at verses 4 through 7. Not only is a godly man to avoid immorality with women, he is also to avoid intoxication from wine. Look what it says in verse 4. "It is not for kings, O Lemuel. It is not for kings to drink wine, or for rulers to desire strong drink. For they will drink and forget what is decreed, and pervert the rights of all the afflicted." What is King Lemuel's mother telling him? She says, do not partake of strong drink, period. What is that? It is an alcoholic beverage that intoxicates the mind to where you don't know what you're doing. Have you ever heard somebody go out drinking and then the next day they woke up and said, I don't remember what I did last night. And then they start going around asking questions. Oh yeah, last night you built some really good houses for people. You went and gave money to the needy. That's not what people do when they get drunk. In fact, when they wake up, they actually find themselves in a lot of trouble and they think, I don't even remember doing that. That is not what is for kings. Brethren, that's not what's for anybody, not just kings, and especially leaders of households. Because what happens when somebody gets drunk, according to Lemuel's mother? For they will drink and forget what is decreed and pervert the rights of all the afflicted. Let's put this in a household perspective. What if a father sets rules and laws within his household and then he gets drunk and transgresses his own laws and afflicts his own children? What is that going to do to the children? What is that going to do to the wife and mother? It will mess up that household. It will destroy the perspective of a household and what a husband is supposed to be and what a father is supposed to be. I have really good friends that had to leave their household at the age of 14, 15, and 16 to go live with other families because their father were drunks. Because they would beat them, they would verbally abuse them, and who knows what else. As fathers and as husbands, we need to be careful that we stay away from these kinds of things, and not just wine, anything that will intoxicate the mind, that will cloud the mind, if you will. When we think of clouding the mind, we usually think of going to wine, and that is a very fair conclusion. But there's tons of other things that can cloud the mind if you allow it to cloud the mind. What are those things? Well, you obviously mentioned wine. What about money? Money can cloud the mind. What about your job? Putting your job before your family. Getting irritated because your family's getting in the way of your job and you lash out at them. Anything that clouds the mind that prevents you from doing your job as husbands and fathers, you need to get it out. Because God has blessed us with a great privilege of leading a household, a family of souls to Him. How are we doing it? Are we doing it with a clear mind? Are we doing it with purity? Or are we doing it with sexual immorality? And are we doing it with a clouded judgment? You keep yourself sober. Why? Why do I need to keep myself sober? Notice this. I want you to write this down. If you're taking notes, I want you to write this down. To be vigilant and watchful for the one who wants to devour your family. Think about that for a second. Who am I talking about? Why does a husband need to be sober-minded, clear-minded? Because he needs to be vigilant and watchful for the one who is trying to devour his family. Who is the great devourer? Satan. He is like a roaring lion seeking whom he may devour. If he sees a family unit where the head is not doing his job, he has a prime household subject to say, you know what, I've already gotten the husband. I don't even have to attack him. Since he's out of the picture, I can start attacking the son, I can start attacking the daughter, and I can start attacking the wife. I can do all these things because the husband's not there to defend them. Number one, why do I need to stay sober as a father and husband? To protect my family from Satan. Number two, to be clear-headed and aware of the needs of my family. The reason I need to be sober and clear-minded is because if I'm over here drunk with whatever, in this context, wine, I don't know what my family needs, I don't know what my children need, and I don't know what my wife needs. Husbands, have you ever seen family units just become utterly destroyed because a husband was drunk and they didn't meet the needs of their family? It happens all the time. Sadly, it even happens within the church. We need to stay sober-minded to protect our family from Satan and to provide for their needs. Number three, to be a good leader, ready to defend and fight for your family. If you look in the book of Nehemiah, Nehemiah chapter 6, I believe it's verse 14 and following, he says, do not be afraid. Remember what you're fighting for and who's fighting for you. God is on your side. Fight for your wife, fight for your daughters, and fight for your sons, and fight for your household. Now, within the context of that chapter, you have the Gentiles who are trying to come in and undo all of the work that the Jews were doing. That is, building the wall and trying to protect and rebuild their city for God. On a spiritual application of that, we could hear Nehemiah say, men, you need to man up. You need to realize that there is an enemy that is trying to destroy you and your family. Remember who you're fighting for. It's not just for you. You're fighting for your wife, you're fighting for your son, you're fighting for your daughter. And don't think that you're doing this by yourself. Remember who's on your side, Jehovah God. And how awesome He is, Nehemiah would say. We can't do that if we're drunk. We can't do that if our judgment is clouded. We also need to be clear-headed, to be a good leader and ready to defend and fight for our family. Number four, to be a peaceful ruler and leader, not quarrelsome nor violent towards your family. Now, I know that one's kind of a mouthful, so what did I just say? What I said was, in order to be a good leader of the household, and in order to teach and lead your wife and your children, you need to be a man who is gentle and patient. Have you ever seen a drunk who's gentle and patient? No. In fact, within 1 Timothy chapter 3 and Titus chapter 1, when you're looking through the qualifications of elders, you actually see that a man who is intoxicated, one who does not abstain from strong drink, is a brawler and a violent man. I've never really seen a man who gets drunk and says, come here, let me give you a big hug. Maybe for a second he is, but then you do something to him and he turns immediately. But if you're not drunk, if you're clear-headed, you can have self-control. You have control over your mind and your emotions. What is the point of drinking? That is, for the world's sake. The world says, drink to ease the mind, to forget all of your worries in this world. That's what Proverbs chapter 31 says. The wine is for the one who's trying to forget everything in his life because he's impoverished, he's bitter, and he doesn't want to remember all those things. So in order to forget all of that, I just got to ease my mind with a little drink. Well, if I ease my mind with a little drink, I'm not in control of myself. The wine is. The strong drink is, which means the strong drink is leading my family. We don't need strong drinks leading families. We need strong drinks out of the home and godly men leading the families. Look at verses 8 through 9. A godly man avoids indifference toward the weak. It says, open your mouth for the mute, for the rights of all the unfortunate. Open your mouth, judge righteously, and defend the rights of the afflicted and needy. Fathers, got a question for you. I have not experienced this. I know I will. But I have experienced it from a child's point of view. My father, a long time ago, I would have done something with my siblings or my friends, and I noticed that it wasn't what we were supposed to do, so I would step back and I wouldn't have any part of it. Well, my dad would catch wind of this and thought, I cannot believe Anthony did that. And I walked in, and he walked in on me, and he said, you're going to get punished for this, you're grounded for this, and just call all your friends because you're not going to be hanging out with them anymore. I'm thinking, what on earth is going on? I thought I did what was right. What happened was he jumped the gun. Have you as fathers ever jumped the gun before and punished your children for something they didn't do? And then when you find out how you feel about that big? Yeah. I'm seeing a lot of fathers laughing and shaking their head. Yeah. And there's probably a lot of kids, hey, he's talking about you up there. We need to make sure that we do not show indifference, jump the gun, and see people that is our children, who are weak, that can't defend themselves, and say, okay, let's talk this out. I'm not going to punish you until I get all of the facts here, and if you are innocent, I'm not going to do it. Well, there are a lot of husbands, a lot of fathers who do this exact thing. They see their children, and for some reason, they think the worst. Well, I got to punish them right now, and then I'll ask questions later. Is that what God does to His children? No. In fact, in the very beginning of time, what does God do to His children, those that He created? And He knows very well what they did. What does He do at first? Where are you? Well, I'm hiding because I'm naked. Well, why are you naked? I didn't say that you were naked. Well, my wife that you gave me this food, and now it's your fault and her fault that I'm in this state. Eve, can you explain this to me? What is God doing? He's asking questions. And He's actually giving them a chance to repent and confess. Before He just comes in and punishes them, He gives them a chance. Then there are some who, after you give them a chance, then there are some who are actually innocent. And they can't really speak for themselves. What are we to do with those children? We fight for them, we speak for them, and we judge righteously. That's the term that is so important in this text. Judge righteously. If you look in 1 Timothy chapter 3, when it says a man is to lead his household well, that word lead means to rule like a king. But it doesn't mean to rule like a tyrant of a king. It means to rule as if Jesus is the king. That's the difference here. It's not a king of men. It's a godly king. Somebody like Solomon, who was known in his time for being a patient man who judged righteously. And if he found out that somebody swindled people in court, he said, you got the death penalty. Now, I'm not saying we need to kill our children. That's not what I'm saying at all. So just throw that out there. But what I am saying is we need to be watchful. We need to judge righteously. It is 5:34, and we are halfway through this lesson. We're getting through this sermon. I'm not making a part 3, so you're going to have to, any supper plans you got, just cancel them right now. All right. Proverbs chapter 31 and verses 10 and following. We see how do I strengthen my husband in love? Now, wait a minute. This last one, you said, how do I lead my wife in love? And we talked about children. While you're doing this in the home, what is the husband doing? He's leading, which is doing what for the wife? Allowing her to do her part and step back and observe how the man is leading and appreciate him and say, I'm so glad I have this man in my life who knows how to lead. I've talked with a lot of widow ladies in my life and at worship services growing up. And every time we talk about their husbands or even women who weren't widows, it was just that their husbands weren't there because of whatever reason. The widow ladies who had faithful husbands, they said, I'm so glad I married him because he really helped me become a stronger Christian. Then you had some women, very old age, who lost their husband and they were not faithful men. And they said, if I could go back in time, I wish that I could have converted him, or I wish that I had a man. Not that they didn't love that individual, but for the sake of their life and making it spiritually easier to follow God, they said, I wish I had somebody who was spiritually strong that would lead this household in the way of God. Deep down, every woman, and correct me if I'm wrong, women, every woman wants a man who knows how to lead and love them. And every man wants a woman that will love and respect them. That's the qualifications that are given to husbands and wives in Ephesians chapter 5 and chapter 6. Husbands, love your wives as Christ also loved the church. Wives, submit to your husbands as the church submits to Christ. Well, what does this mean for the family unit? How can a man love a woman who does not respect him? And how can a woman respect a man that does not love her? You see how it's mutual. And even if one does not love the other or the one does not respect the other, God expects us to fulfill our role and He will deal with it. Husbands, love your wives. Wives, respect your husbands. That's what God says. Well, by loving my wife, I will give my life for her. I will lead my house in the way of God. As Joshua would say, as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. Well, what is the wife supposed to do? Leading a household is a very stressful thing. So how is the wife to contribute to her helpmeet? Well, in Proverbs chapter 31, King Lemuel's mother says, this is the kind of woman you are to look for. And remember, what is Lemuel? He is a king. Being a king is very stressful. So what are we to do King Lemuel thinking, what am I to do? What kind of wife am I to look for if I'm to have this role? Lemuel's mother says, I've got you covered. Here's a list. Verses 10 to 12, a godly woman is blameless with finances. A godly woman is blameless with finances. That's kind of odd, talking about finances. But just bear with me. Verses 13 through 18, a godly woman is busy at home. A godly woman is busy at home. Verses 19 to 21, a godly woman is benevolent toward others. A godly woman is benevolent towards others, verses 19 to 21. And verses 22 to 27, a godly woman is beautiful inside and out. A godly woman is beautiful inside and out. And then King Lemuel's mother concludes in verses 28 to 31, a godly woman is blessed for her godliness. Notice how it talks about all these things that King Lemuel needs to look for, and at the very end, to put a bow on it, she needs to be godly. That's the one qualification that's branded in King Lemuel's mind. My mom says I need to find a godly woman, a godly helpmate. That's the way God intended it to be. Now, real quick, those who are looking to find a spouse, those who are dating, you're probably thinking, this doesn't really technically relate to me because I'm not married. You need to start doing these things now. Because if you get married and you're thinking, well, I can start when I get married. That's not how this works. You need to learn how to do these things Find somebody who is a good mentor. Find somebody who is a good example. Study on this through the Word of God and try to become this. There is a saying, one of my good friends told me this. In order to find, from a man's standpoint, you could swap these genders. In order to find the woman you are looking for, you must first become the man she is looking for. Think about that for a second. In order to find the woman that I'm looking for, I need to become the man that she's looking for. In order to find the man that I'm looking for, I need to become the woman that he is looking for. Well, what if I'm not in the state spiritually that I need to be in? But I'm trying to find this. The one that you're trying to look for, he's also trying to find that same thing. And if you're not it, guess what's not going to happen? You're not going to find that spiritual helpmate. You need to figure out where you stand with God, commit yourself to God, and through being faithful to God, you will find a faithful helpmate. Now, bring it back into those who are already married and who are helping each other. Let's see here, verses 10 through 12. A godly woman is blameless with finances. An excellent wife, verse 10, who can find? For her worth is far above jewels. The heart of her husband trusts in her, and he will have no lack of gain. She does him good and not evil all the days of her life. I love how King Lemuel starts this out. An excellent wife, who can find? Who can find a good wife? It's hard to find one these days. It's hard to find a good husband these days. A good godly man, a good godly wife. Why is it so hard to find somebody like this? Because their worth is far above jewels. The heart of her husband trusts in her. A good godly woman can take the heart of her husband and say, you don't have to worry about this. It's not going to get shattered. It's not going to break. It'll stay with me, and I will keep it, and I will protect it, just like you do with me. That's what the wife needs to do for her husband. Assure him that she will protect his heart. Same thing goes for the husband. Say, I will protect you, and you do not have to worry about that. Verses 13 to 18, a godly woman is busy at home. Notice real quick, I'm getting ahead of myself. Look at verses 13 and 18. She looks for wool and flax and works with her hands in delight. She is like a merchant ship. She brings her food from afar. She rises also while it is still night and gives food to her household and portions to her maidens. She considers a field and buys it. For her earnings she plants a vineyard. She girds herself with strength and makes her, let's see here, I got a little sticky note here, it's in my way, and makes her arms strong. She senses that her gain is good. Her lamp does not go out at night. Now, what is this woman doing? This woman is fulfilling her role. She's at home. She's providing for her children. Notice what she's also doing. Far above rubies, okay, verses 10 and following. But what is she doing with finances? Well, she considers a field and buys it. What is she doing with that field? She's planting food. She's trying to provide for her children. Well, I thought providing was from the husband. Yes, he's got a job. He is to work, but he is also to defend. The wife is the manager, if you will, of the house. She manages. I guess you could see it this way. The husband is the overseer, the superintendent of the home, make sure everything's going well. And the wife is the manager of the home, making sure that everything is getting done. Well, what is she making sure that everything's getting done? What's everything that is getting done? The children are getting fed. The chores are getting done. She's providing for not just the children, but notice, provides portions for her maidens, verse 15. She is like a merchant ship. She brings her food from afar. She is a hard worker. Guys who are looking for a good godly wife, find a godly woman who will work, who's not afraid to work, who will get out in the fields and work with her hands. You read about in the Song of Solomon how she said, nobody's going to love me because I am of darker skin. What she's referring to there is she's working outside a lot. All the women in her day and age were inside doing things that would not allow her skin to be burnt and charred, but she was a hard-working woman. She was out in the field working, and Solomon says, your beauty goes deeper than that. Your beauty's not just on the outside, it's on the inside. It's who you are. You're a hard worker. That's what we need to be looking for. That's what King Lemuel was told by his mother to look for. Look for a godly woman who is busy at home. And notice where she is not. Look at Proverbs chapter 7 and verses 8 and 12. Passing through the streets near her corner, and he takes the way to her house. She is now in the streets, now in the squares, and lurks by every corner. What is this talking about? It's talking about the adulteress. A woman who goes out of her home and neglects all of her responsibilities that God has given her and starts looking for other men. King Lemuel is told by his mother, you avoid that kind of person, and you look for a woman who will fulfill her role, who will love you, who will love God, and who is a hard worker. Now, it's not bad for a woman to work outside the home. That's not what I'm getting at. In fact, if we keep reading, we see that she is actually somebody who has a job outside the home. She makes clothing, articles of clothing, not just for her children and husband, but for her husband's friends, providing things for the community. How can you do that if you don't have a job of sorts? But notice this, she doesn't neglect her responsibilities at home. There is a balance. And she says, I need to fulfill my role, but I also need to provide. Look at verses 19 to 21. A godly woman is benevolent toward others. 19 to 21. She stretches out her hands to the distaff, and her hands grasp the spindle. She extends her hand to the poor, and she stretches out her hands to the needy. So she is not afraid of the snow for her household, for all her household are clothed with scarlet. What is this referring to here? Once again, we see that she is providing. She is benevolent. And not just benevolent to her children, but benevolent to all those who are in need. Let's break this down. She cares for the less fortunate, number one. And number two, she cares for her household. What are the less fortunate? Those, the distaff, the needy, and the poor. What's of her household? They are warm and sheltered, and they are clothed and provided for. How is this helping the husband? Well, remember, the husband has a responsibility. He has a job. He's not able to be at home all the time. So what is the wife to do? She is to help fulfill her role and to relieve the stress within the household. How can she do that? By providing, by helping, by being godly, by being a hard worker, and teaching. You know, in this time, especially in the Jewish culture, the responsibility of teaching the children, both male and female, from ages 1 to 5, was on the mother. The mother, which is actually kind of interesting now that I think about it, in the context of Proverbs chapter 31, the mother was to teach the young boy how to be a man and respect authority. The mother was also to teach the young women, their daughters, how to be respectful, how to submit, and how to be a hard worker. What is the mother doing for her son in this chapter? Teaching him how to be godly, how to respect authority, how to love his wife. She's teaching him all of these things. That's how you can help your husband fulfill your role as he fulfills his. And to fulfill your role as wives and mothers, care for the less fortunate and care for your household. I know we're speeding through this. I wish we had time to go deeper in this, but we're almost out of time. Next Sunday, if the clock's gone, don't ask any questions, please. Verses 22 to 27. A godly woman is beautiful inside and out. Is beautiful inside and out. Verses 22 to 27. She makes coverings for herself. Her clothing is fine linen and purple. Her husband is known in the gates when he sits among the elders of the land. She makes linen garments and sells them. There it is, making a living. And supplies belts to the tradesmen, providing for the men in the community as well. Strength and dignity are her clothing, and she smiles at the future. She opens her mouth in wisdom and the teaching of kindness is on her tongue. She looks well to the ways of her household and does not eat the bread of idleness. What is this talking about for the wife? Well, we see in verses 22 to 23, she is modest, she is respectful, and presentable for her husband. She is modest, respectful, and presentable for her husband. What does it say? She makes coverings for herself, so her clothing is fine linen. Her husband is known in the gates when he sits among the elders of the land. The husband has a good reputation because the wife has a good reputation. Have you ever heard of men in the church who are leaders? And they're great men, but then you hear about their wives. They eat of the bread of idleness, if you will. They gossip, they talk. They're not modest, whether it's in their apparel or in the way that they act. They're very disrespectful. That's not how it needs to be, especially among the Christian. A Christian family, a husband needs to fulfill his role, which we already discussed, and a wife, a mother, needs to fulfill her role. What does that mean? She needs to be modest. Well, we could talk all day about modesty. What does it mean to be modest? Well, it means all the way down to the knee and covering up here. That's not all that modesty means. Modesty, in its purest form, means you do not attract attention to yourself and away from God. That's what modesty is. And you do that, you can put the attention on you and away from God by dressing very loosely. The book of James talks about wearing rings and earrings and all these types of clothing. You can be immodest by putting a whole bunch of clothes on. Well, what does it mean to be modest? She is presentable. She is respectful to both her husband and to God. Verses 24 to 25, she is a businesswoman and provides for both friends and family. Now, this is what we talked about. It's not bad for we hear a lot of about the men saying, well, the wife needs to be at home and nothing else. Well, she needs to fulfill her role within the home, yes, but she can also have a job. She can actually use the job to glorify God, to help further provide for the family, but she does not need to neglect her responsibilities in the home. That's very, very important. But notice what she's doing with her business, verses 24 and 25. She makes linen garments and sells them and supplies belts to the tradesmen. Strength and dignity are her clothing, and she smiles at the future. How is she able to smile at the future? Because she is responsible. She's making things and selling them and helping out in the family. And she knows because I am doing this, I can help my family. I can help my husband. Well, what about verse 26? She is a teacher and provides wisdom for all who are in the household. This kind of goes back to what we were discussing within the teaching ages of ages 1 to 5. She was to have wisdom and knowledge and teach these young children all the way up to the age of 5 and then hand them over to the husband, and then the husband would then further teach them. There's a role that is played on both parts, both husband and wife, father and mother. And she is to have wisdom and knowledge. Wisdom and knowledge of what? What did we talk about in the first point? Teach them who God is not. Teach them who God is. Teach them authority. Teach them what marriage is. All of these things go in the role of playing, of being a wife as well as a husband. She is watchful, verse 27. She is watchful of her home and minds her own business. Look what it says in verse 27. She looks well to the ways of her household and does not eat the bread of idleness. There is a passage in Proverbs. Let's see if I have it here. I think Proverbs chapter 21, verse 9. It is better to live in a corner of a roof than in a house shared with a contentious woman. Solomon said it is better to live in an attic than with a woman that is constantly arguing, constantly fighting back, not fulfilling her role. Well, I think out of everybody who could say that, Solomon probably could because he had 900 plus wives and concubines. But even if it's just one, it makes the household very hard to function. If the husband is drunk all the time and the wife is always arguing and fighting and nitpicking, the children, it's miserable. It's miserable for the husband, it's miserable for the wife, and it's miserable for the children. That's why God has created this order and says you need to follow it. It'll only function this way. Why does God know that? Because He made it. Well, she does not eat the bread of idleness. She works, she keeps busy, and she stays out of other people's business. That's what a wife needs to do. Verses 28 to 31, look at the conclusion of this chapter that King Lemuel's mother tells him. A godly woman is blessed for her godliness. Her children, verse 28, rise up and bless her. Her husband also, and he praises her, saying, many daughters have done nobly, but you excel them all. Charm is deceitful and beauty is vain, but a woman who fears the Lord, she shall be praised. Give her the product of her hands, and let her works praise her in the gates. What is the mother of Lemuel saying? She is praised by her children, verse 28. She is praised by her husband, verse 29. And she is praised by God, verses 30 and 31. But she can only receive this praise if she fulfills her role. So, how do I teach my family in love? Nurture your children, sacrifice for your wife, and strengthen your husband. That's the summary of this entire lesson. Nurture and bring up your children, sacrifice and protect your wife, and strengthen and respect your husbands. Now, a lot of us are probably thinking, that was a really good lesson, but I'm already doing all of that. That's wonderful. As Paul would say to the Thessalonians, keep doing it. Don't stop. Keep doing it. Get better at it. If you're not doing it, brethren, we need to start doing it. Because there are children within the home, grandchildren within the home. There are wives that are struggling and husbands that are just dreading coming back home because they know what's going to be there. And that's not how it needs to be. God has designed the home to be in such a way that it is a peaceful place. It is a loving place. It is a nurturing place. It is a godly place. And that's how it needs to be. It may be the case that as a husband, as a wife, you're saying, I haven't been doing what I need to be doing. I have not been fulfilling my roles like I need to. As a father, as a mother, I have not been teaching my children the way that I need to be teaching them. I have not been raising them in the admonition of the Lord like I need to be doing. And that needs to change. Or maybe it's the case that you're struggling within the role that you are fulfilling, and it's getting harder and harder, and you need prayers for strength. Whatever the case may be, I beg and plead that you come now as together we stand and as we sing.